If you look at networking as a whole, Ethernet switching is touching close to 100 billion a year right now. But we're not done. This market is expected to double yet again to a $200 billion market in the next decade.
If I told you there's a data center being built for $1 billion, what percentage of that is typically networking?
About 10 to 15% in the investor world, we think of markets as hyperscalers a market, enterprises a market, and so on. At the scale at which we are seeing things, we think of Microsoft as a market, Meta is a market, Google is a market. They're that big all by themselves. For hyperscaler, we're using just our switches today. At scale, they would save somewhere between 50 to 100 megawatts of power. It's that big a delta. The current need of the entire market is power efficiency and speed of delivery, so that the GPUs are not sitting idle. What we offer with what we call the joint development model or the JDM model is a way where we can custom build the hardware with the hyperscaler software stack, integrate that, test that, add more features, harden it, and ship it as a turnkey solution. It's not about stealing market share from anyone else right now. The market is growing so fast, they don't believe any single supplier can keep up to their needs.
The last major networking company built in the space was your alma mater, Arista. What's the rough enterprise value today?
For 160 billion.
What's your sense for how large a company can be built here?
I think...
Hi everyone, I'm Guru Chahal, and this is the Investment Memo, the show where founders reveal the stories behind their businesses and how they will shape the future of their industries. Today, I'm joined by Anshul Sadana, the founder and CEO of Nexthop AI, the next generation networking company built for the world's largest cloud operators. I first met Anshul over 2 decades ago during his time at Arista Networks, where he rose to be the COO and helped build one of the most successful networking companies in history. Since founding Nexthop AI in 2024, Anshul and his team have moved at an incredible pace, winning production programs with some of the most demanding hyperscalers and assembling an all-star team of talent. We'll talk about why AI requires a fundamentally different networking architecture, why the JDM model is the optimal approach for hyperscalers, and how Nexthop plans to become a multi-billion-dollar business in one of the most competitive markets in tech. Anshul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Guru.
First of all, congratulations on the round. I know it's just a starting milestone, but it's a critical milestone in the company's journey. And thank you for your partnership.
Absolutely. Thank you for your support.
Perfect. So I'm going to take you a little bit behind the scenes today. We're going to start with a version of the investment memo that I wrote internally. It's both a reflection of both the amount of research we do, but how seriously we take our job as we get the entire investment team excited about what you're building. So we'll start with that. Here is a copy of the memo for you.
You should have shown it to me when you were negotiating the deal.
There's a reason why I didn't. What you're going to find is how excited we are about the business and how our underwrite truly demonstrates our conviction in the opportunity you have and we have together in building, one of the most consequential companies in history. So it's very exciting. Why don't we start with a little bit of maybe on page 2 where we talk about the investment thesis, and what you'll notice is one of the first things was more of a outline of how the market has developed to a point where there are only a few teams and a few individuals that have the ability to not just build incredible networking products, but have the foresight to see where the industry is going. So I want to start there. I want to start with your background of how you got into this industry and how, especially at Arista, you saw these waves of networking and you were able to stay ahead of them and build a world-class company. Why don't we start there and then we'll dig into what's changing now in the market.
Absolutely. In the early days at Arista, I had just come from Cisco. Cisco was very focused on enterprise networking at that point, and the cloud was just starting off. And there was demand for a lot of storage. There was demand for cloud computing. And as you looked at that market, the architectures were different. The spend was different. The application model was different. So we had to redo everything from scratch. So we built these networks that were non-blocking, that were designed for hundreds of thousands of servers talk to each other, fully non-blocking any-to-any traffic patterns. That was never done before.
Right, because the enterprise networks were much smaller. You're talking about a market where you're selling, even the largest enterprises were probably two, three orders of magnitude smaller than the cloud providers, than the hyperscalers.
Absolutely. There was a very interesting trend going on at that point, which people compare to now in terms of all the spend and capex and so on. In the 2005 to 2010 era, the five largest US cloud companies, they were called Web 2.0 at that point,
Right.
were spending more than all of the service providers added together. And people were amazed. This is over 30 billion in capex. Of course, that number seems very small now, but in 2008, 30 billion was a lot of money. That's really when the stack was changing. We said we have to go after it. And of course, the rest is history. It's come a long way since then.
I think it says a lot about the team that you build and at Arista that was able to not just recognize that wave, but build to that. I think it also brings me to my next point, which is it's often hard for the dominant incumbents at the time to then identify the next wave and sort of execute behind it, as what happened with Cisco and Arista back then. Talk to us, please, about what's happening in the market right now. What's this next wave that's coming and why that's important, and how that led you to say, hey, you can do anything, at that point at Arista, coming out of Arista, but then you decided to go and build Nexthop.
Absolutely. AI is moving so fast that if you just sit on your computer every day and look at all the latest news, the new agents, the new co-pilots, you feel this is the time, this is the moment. You can't miss out on it. So I felt, yes, I could have stayed, with my role as the COO and continued. It was a great platform, and obviously Arista is a great company. But you get these opportunities very rarely in life where something new is happening around you. I felt it's time to relook at the AI stack and see what can I do and can I contribute to that. And just in the last 18 months, we've seen the world change so many times. Of course, you're one of the biggest investors in Anthropic. We love Claude. We use it daily. And there's a lot to do at every layer of the stack, including networking. And that is why I decided this is the best time to enter when so much is changing.
You're going after these new AI data centers, but also serving the traditional cloud hyperscalers. How is that market structured today in terms of the choices a hyperscaler has to source their networking? And in that existing market structure, why is the JDM model so interesting? Why were you so focused on exploring this approach to bringing product to market? So let's start with the hyperscalers of what choices they have, and then where does JDM fit in that model?
Absolutely. If you look at networking as a whole, Ethernet switching is touching close to 100 billion a year right now as a TAM.
One of the largest markets in infrastructure.
That is
Most
correct.
people don't recognize it. One of the largest, outside of servers and perhaps GPUs, it's the largest market. If I told you there's a data center being built for $1 billion, what percentage of that is typically networking?
Yeah, about 10 to 15% of that billions of dollars is going to be networking.
So every $1 billion, $100 to $150 million is just spent on networking. That's what creates that $100 billion networking market.
Correct, but we're not done.
Yeah.
This market is going to grow almost exponentially and is expected to double yet again to a $200 billion market in the next decade.
Wow.
So as a result of that, when you look at this market, there's a lot of opportunity. The market is divided into enterprise networking, data center, cloud, AI, and so on. But just within the hyperscalers, largely speaking, last 2 decades, there have been two models. One is the standard OEM model. You can buy a proprietary stack, hardware, software, and so on from the biggest networking companies. That's Cisco, that's Arista, that's Juniper, that's NVIDIA, and so on. Or if you're a hyperscaler that wants to customize and build on their own, Google, Amazon, Meta have done this for a long time. And what they do is they take the best of merchant silicon like a Broadcom chip, and they have a hardware team that designs their own products. They have a software team that designs their own network software, and they work with an ODM, typically in Taiwan, to go get that switch manufactured. So there were only two of these models for the last 2 decades, the OEM model or the ODM model.
So build
or buy.
Or buy. That's the only choice I have. And the driving factor between the two, I'm sure partly is cost, but I suspect it's also because in case of build, You're looking for something that the big networking store doesn't have. You want something unique for your environment. Is that the primary motivation, or is the primary motivation just cost savings?
No, actually, the primary motivation is going faster than the industry,
Right.
having your secret sauce, your IP in there, your ideas that gives you a competitive edge,
Right.
and getting all that customization built around your own hardware, your own software, your own operational stack for the data center. So there was only that model.
Yeah.
However, with AI, what's happening is the market is moving really fast. In the past, you had to build one new generation of switches every 3 to 4 years. So you have a small team of 30 engineers, they can do that. With AI, you have to build about 8 to 10 products every year for different use cases to keep it optimized. Your internal teams may not be able to keep up. Or if you're working with an ODM, you don't have enough resources to manage that. But if you buy from the OEM ecosystem, you don't get the customizations, you don't get the custom hardware, you don't get your software stack, and so on.
So you have no edge. You have the same stuff that everyone else has.
It actually may not even fit inside your data center.
Oh, wow.
There's so much that's changed. The different hyperscalers, we talk about liquid cooling, each one has a different rack architecture. So if you buy from the outside, that switch won't even fit physically. What we offer with what we call the joint development model or the JDM model is a way where we can custom build the hardware with the hyperscaler software stack, integrate that, test that, add more features, harden it, and ship it as a turnkey solution. So now they don't have to depend just on the internal teams. The internal teams do certain projects. And then for certain projects, they come to companies like us, like, hey, here's a project you should work on for us. And of course, these are massive bills. And this is a space that we know fairly well. And as a result of that, if you can execute well, build high quality products, there's a massive return possible by getting into these designs and scaling with the hyperscaler.
It's the age old, how they say you make one of three decisions: you build, you buy, or you partner. This is sort of the center partner approach. And so if I'm a hyperscaler, my choices now expand beyond highly customized, but incredible work internally to produce my own switch versus go to a large networking store and buy a pre-built switch. Now I've got the best of both worlds, which is I can take my requirements, I can work with Nexthop and say, this is the kind of data center I'm building. Recommend to me what are some unique ways in which I can build a better network. And then your teams are part of that initial even design discussion, I would assume? Or is it that an RFP comes out and you just bid for it?
No, the work actually starts at least 6 months prior to an RFP.
Right.
Because we have to work on what are the trade-offs. And if the cloud companies had an internal team, this is the kind of debate they would go through. So we actually partner with them way before an RFP comes out to give them feedback on what choices are going to work, what's not going to work, what's the signal integrity for a certain design, what's the sort of thermal design, how much tolerance can you get on mechanical fixtures and so on. Then based on that, they'll come out with a real requirement and then everyone participates in that.
So it's very unique, right? In the sense that you're truly an extension of their team. You're truly bringing the experience, the skill set, the ability to bring in very, very high quality product to market, but in a highly customized way with them through that entire process. Why is this possible today? Why not 10 years ago? Why not 15 years ago?
That's a really good question. And you often wonder how come something wasn't done before.
Yeah.
It's not like this is a brand new idea on build versus buy versus partner. But there's a time for everything. The Ethernet switching TAM was roughly $10 billion in 2010. It's about $100 billion today, or heading to $100 billion. But we're not done. It's increasing even more. And when you build something off the shelf, you can sell to 20,000 customers. But if you build something custom for one company only, you need critical mass. You need a lot of volume for that to be justified. And today, the way the hyperscalers are investing in AI and the capex that they have more than justifies this kind of a partnership and an investment.
So it's really the market had to get to a point where it's so large that serving the market with a JDM model is enough to build a large next generation, sort of a generation lasting company, a durable company. That's sort of the the biggest change in the market?
Well, I would say, in the investor world, we think of markets as hyperscalers a market, enterprises a market, and so on. At the scale at which we are seeing things, we think of Microsoft as a market, Meta is a market, Google is a market. They're that big all by themselves.
Amazing. And only getting bigger thanks to the AI wave. You're at the frontier of AI buildouts. I mean, we talk on the venture side and certainly in the industry about the hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars that are being spent on data center buildouts. And most people, when they think of that, they think of NVIDIA, but Nexthop is right there. I mean, you're right there in part of these massive buildouts. That's clearly a big tailwind. But when we break this down, why is it that as these buildouts happen, the existing networking industry is unable to serve them? Certainly, one of which is AI networks are just different. But is there enough diversity at the individual data center rack level? Some might have liquid cooling, some don't. Some have different ways of cooling, power constraints. Is everything really that unique that it creates an opportunity for the JDM model?
Well, I think there are two aspects. Number one, the world is moving faster than many companies are executing to. So that creates a gap in the market. And while the hyperscalers can invest more on their own, they don't see the right ROI in investing in networking because their first priority is to build their own GPUs or TPUs, build their own models, build their own applications. And if they still have resources, they'll get to networking. But because we exist and options like us exist, they would rather partner with us and go that direction. In addition to that, each of these large hyperscalers truly have become custom over time because they build their operational stack, their physical data centers, the way they do power, cooling, deployments, and so on, based on their cloud computing stack.
Yeah.
Now you have history of 5 million to 10 million servers, all deployed, running up in production per hyperscaler. With that much history, they're not going to look back and say, I wish I can give up all of that and go back to a different standard. What they do is their standard. And now they need a solution that fits right in, which is why it has to be custom. And because you need to build so many new products every year, go faster, new cycle every 12 months, I think they need more partners that can execute faster for them.
I'd love to get into your head a little bit, Anshul. And so these hyperscalers, when you work with them, what are they trying to optimize for? And what are you optimizing for? Are they optimizing for cost? Are they optimizing for something else? Time to market? Where's the market? Help us understand, please. And how are you building then Nexthop to serve that market need?
There are lots of things you can optimize for in this space. However, the current need of the entire market is power efficiency and speed of delivery so that the GPUs are not sitting idle.
Great.
For power efficiency, we just announced the world's lowest power 51 terabit switch.
Wow.
And that's a focus throughout the company. We're doing it across the board. How can you save a little bit of power? If a hyperscaler were using just our switches today at scale, they would save somewhere between 50 to 100 megawatts of power. It's that big a delta.
Wow.
Which is why you have to keep optimizing it. Now, in the past, data centers were built, with 20 racks of compute or storage per row. And we used to talk about this metric called PUE. It was air cooled. How much are you investing in cooling the infrastructure versus actually running your servers and so on? That market has shifted completely. Now you're focused on, can I save that last 1%? Can I save that last 0.5%? Because when you're investing at 10 gigawatts a year, 1% of saving is 100 megawatts. And that's what we lean in to help our customers achieve.
I love that. And we hear this from hyperscalers and data center builders and AI labs all the time. Lack of power and the ability to source power is becoming a big bottleneck. And so in some ways, every percentage point in power that you help them save is a percentage point of power they can dedicate towards GPUs that can then be monetized and used. So it's not just about the JDM model, it's about using the JDM model to deeply understand their constraints and then building something to exactly satisfy this constraint. It not just looks like, you're building the world's most power efficient, highest performance switches today. So what's not to like here? That's great. And the more successful you are, if I'm a GM sitting at an existing networking vendor, what is hardest for me in terms of adopting some of the strategy that you're building Nexthop with? Why is this hard for me to pursue?
Well, I don't have to mention this at all to you. You're one of the best investors. Lightspeed is a great firm. And as you know, in Silicon Valley, there are many, many ideas, but execution is hard. So while you can try and look at people's ideas, I think execution is hard. You need a very, very solid team
Yeah.
that can execute this quickly on products. And some companies are still great. They'll execute very well. But some of the legacy companies are lagging behind. And that also creates an opening because the TAM is expanding. And as our hyperscalers tell us, it's not about stealing market share from anyone else right now. The market is growing so fast, they don't believe any single supplier can keep up to their needs.
To your point, this is not easy to execute on. It's not like you can hire 5 software engineers, give them Claude code, and build an incredible business. Give us a sense for what kind of expertise in your team you've built over the last 18 months. We know you have a world-class software team. What else does a company like Nexthop need? What kind of expertise, what kind of teams need to be built out so we have a more visceral sense for how complex this kind of business can be?
You have to build a complete business. You're not just building a product and expecting it to sell. So we have a phenomenal hardware team. They are very good at high-speed board design, a great signal integrity team, a great optical team, a great thermal team, a great mechanical team, a good team that does software, but within software, there are different parts of the stack, everything from the Linux kernel to the routing layers. We have a great automated test infrastructure that the team has built up. We have a supply chain team that knows how to manage complexity across the globe. You take that together as a package and take a team that understands the customer's needs, the network design, the architecture, and how to support them, have that trust with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what our team of over 300 brings to the table.
So you need those specialist teams that can not just win the customer trust, but on the other side can also build that product. And supply chains, last year was pretty interesting. Tariffs go up, tariffs go down. Those changes are still happening. How do you respond to that? You're building a global supply chain. Give us a little bit of under the covers on how you worked through those changes in Q1, Q2 of last year.
The good news is when you're partnering with the customer versus having a very classic customer vendor relationship, we have the trust with our customers. We actually went to each one of them, laid down all the cards on the table and said, look, we're not sure where the tariffs will land, but these are the 4 choices we have in front of you. And there's risk with each one of them where we might have higher tariffs than expected. There are some choices that will be better longer term. And we collaborated with each one of them and came to conclusions to be in countries that have turned out to be fairly safe and reasonable cost. Obviously, you have to be away from certain countries where there's a lot of geopolitical tension. At the same time, costs do matter. You cannot just move everything to high cost areas, and we had to balance that out. But I'll give you an example of using AI agents in Claude when it comes to tariffs. When you pay tariffs just on prototypes entering the country, there's a lot of manual paperwork just to recoup something from the US customs authorities. And our team was able to use an AI agent that helped them essentially go line by line and claw back some of the duties and taxes and tariffs that were overpaid. But it took us maybe $500 worth of tokens to do all of that and get hundreds of thousands of dollars back.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I love that story. And it's another example of how AI is just making us all so much more productive, so much more efficient.
One other example on this is extremely sort of timely with what's going on around us is we talk about 10x engineers. You can only imagine, we see this daily. What happens when you give a 10x engineer unlimited access to Claude and they spin off 5 different agents doing work in parallel? You essentially get a 50x engineer. And that's the level of productivity we're able to achieve and build products faster.
Right. And that's another, going back to our question on in what areas would it be hardest for incumbents to follow Nexthop? You're building an AI native company. Every function is AI first. And that's just so much harder for existing companies to pursue. But I also want to go back to one more thing, Anshul, that you mentioned in the tariff story. You truly partner with your customers, not just a vendor to them. You're truly partnering with them, which means when there are macro changes like supply chain issues, long lead times, tariffs, these kind of decisions, you're bringing them in with you under the covers and saying, look, this is as much your business as mine. Let's work through this problem together and solve it in a way that works for you. And I think that's incredibly innovative. That's incredibly innovative because for too long, the entire industry had this crazy divide of I'm the customer and you're the vendor, and there's this antagonistic relationship of trying to just extract as much as you can on either side. Um, this is a great example of changing that dynamic in the industry. Do you think that this is the future in infrastructure?
I think it's actually hard for most companies to do this because you have to get rid of that false sense of security that this is your information, you can't reveal it to anyone else. But being under that false pretext doesn't help you because these are the hyperscalers that can and already build everything on their own. So you're not really hiding much. But changing that culture and reestablishing that trust in that ecosystem is extremely hard.
Yeah.
So we decided, these are the customers we have the relationships with, and we'll just be completely transparent with them as we are transparent inside the company. And the customers absolutely love that. They value that. They respect that, which is why we believe we can be an extension of their internal team.
I mean, culture is such a strong part of this. I'm going to dig into that a little bit more. You've been a leader. You've built teams for 20, 25 years now. Would love to dig into your management style. Are you more like Jensen with 50 plus reports? Are you more of a reduced span of control and more of a macro manager? Tell us a little bit about how you work with your team.
Well, let's not compare with Jensen because we only have 300 people in the company. So when you look at how companies operate, and we have many people at Nexthop who've come and told me, Anshul, I want this to be a fun place to work at. I want this to be the last 15 years I work at, and then I'm done. And I asked them, why did you leave your previous job? They come and say, it wasn't fun anymore. And you have to dig deeper into what are those elements that makes people change. When someone joins a new company, they're super excited year one. By year 3, year 5, they're getting bored. By year 10, they're like, I'm fed up of this place. There's a lot of nonsense. Why do you have to deal with this? And so on. In general, we call it cultural issues, politics, organizational hierarchy, the company is slow, decision making is not fast, and so on. And while all companies know that's the problem, it's very hard to change it if you get there. So first of all, you have to hire people that are like-minded. So at Nexthop, we value collaboration a lot. If you try to be an individual contributor that is a rock star, but cannot collaborate with others, over time, that creates silos, that creates the management of information, that creates the politics that come with it. Then you have to add a lot of managers to oversee that. Yeah. Over time, people form groups. And it's not a merit-based system. It's who is the favorite for the manager. So people like to sort of please them. And as a result of that, you're going to end up with all the issues large companies end up with. So we decided the team we're picking is cherry picked. They have to fit culturally, not just technically, but also culturally. And we're having a great time. Everyone is able to partner together. We have lots of fun events, picnics, hikes, lunches in the middle of a stressful day, and go back and work till late evening and so on. And that's sort of the fun of work back again.
This is such a common theme in a lot of our investments today. Some of the highest performing teams, including Nexthop, and certainly companies like Anthropic, are so focused on culture, getting the culture right, ensuring that there is mission alignment. And it's great to see that you're making that a foundational sort of requirement at Nexthop as you're building the team out. How do you ensure that as you continue to scale, this stays? Now, key part of that is hiring. Does that mean you're interviewing everyone? Like, how do you ensure this scales? Because you're going to go from 300 to 3,000. How do you maintain that culture?
It's already very hard for me to interview everyone because then we can't go fast enough. But I think this really lies not just on me, but the entire team at Nexthop. Everyone in the leadership team, the management team, the tech leads, they're all aware of what our cultural requirements are and they sort of focus on that. And I think if 300 people are looking out for that cultural fit, we are far better off than just me.
I want to go back a little bit to the market that you're building into, because building the team, it's so much easier to get them mission aligned and excited when they know they're going after a big mission, right? So I'll share some stats with you. One of the largest networking companies ever built was Cisco Systems. Do you know what their enterprise value was when they IPO'd?
Actually, I don't.
It was about $300 million. 300 million. Think about that. The last major networking company built in the space was your alma mater, Arista. What's the rough enterprise value today?
Well, it's about 160 billion.
$160 billion company. You're going after a market that is several times that size over the next 10 years as both hyperscalers, AI data centers, and cloud data centers all continue to increase in size. What kind of conviction do you have that you can build that size of a company or more or less with this, keeping in mind that it's a different business model, it's a JDM business model, which probably has downstream repercussions on what the nature of the business looks like. What's your sense for how large a company can be built here?
I think it's actually very hard to see 10, 20 years from now.
Sure.
I often tell the team at Nexthop, they're very concerned about, are we in an AI bubble? What if spending reduces or goes down? And what we have to realize is that these things come in waves and the market will overcorrect in both directions every time. You can never get it right. So yes, there will be a few corrections. It'll go up, it'll come down a little bit. But I have immense conviction that between now and to, let's say, 2040, the next 15 years, when we look back in 2040, let's say 2025, 2026, the spend was just tiny. It's much bigger now. And because of that directional growth in the market and the value that AI brings to every aspect of our lives, I think we can have a great outcome. I don't think you start a business or a company with a goal of it has to achieve a certain, 20 billion or 40 billion or 100 billion outcome. You build it to succeed. And, over time, you'll find out what your course is. But because it's a very large TAM, if you execute well, the results will be great.
Anshul, infrastructure is not for the faint of heart. Building infrastructure businesses, hardware, we compared your team. Most teams we are privileged to partner with have a software team and a go-to-market team. You have a software team, you have a hardware team, you have a go-to-market team, you have a supply chain team, you have a new product introduction team, you have compliance and audit and people who are trying to figure out the tariff situation and get, refunds for overpayments on tariffs and customs. These are not things that the average startup in Silicon Valley is used to. It feels hard. It probably is hard. What would you say to prospective founders who want to build a hardware systems business, an infrastructure business, knowing this stuff is hard? What would be your advice to your younger self or to other founders who want to build an infra?
Infra is hard because there's a lot of investment needed in terms of money you have to raise. And second, the deployment cycles are way longer than software. To start a discussion with a customer, to the time you have a pilot deployment, to the time it ramps, it could take 2.5 years.
Wow.
So you have to have a lot of patience for that, number one. Number two, you need to have domain expertise. Because without that domain expertise, these companies can build it on their own. They don't need you. But if you have the domain expertise and have the right trust and relationships, then absolutely you can build a tremendous business with all of these companies that are looking for more help because they are unable to keep up and do this on their own.
Yeah. So it looks like, these two things are so critical, right? In some sense, the work starts years, if not decades, ahead of you starting that company because you got to have that expertise. You got to be deep in the market where you can win over the customer's trust. And then you got to have the conviction that I will go out and I will be able to raise the capital and I will be able to win over these customers over a course of years. So have that patience, not sort of this is not the lean startup model. This is not, hey, if it doesn't work in 3 months, we'll pivot into something else. This is years and years of hard work and blood, sweat, and tears, which is what it takes. But it's a prize worth going after. The most valued companies on the planet today are infrastructure companies. If you look at companies like Apple, if you look at companies like NVIDIA, if you look at companies like Google, yes, it's a search engine, but at the end of the day, the durability of the business comes from that incredible global infrastructure that they built. And of course, subsequently GCP and others. And so massive size of prize, definitely worth going after, but But I love your recommendations on make sure you've got conviction and patience, and make sure you have confidence that you've got something to offer to the market that will be deeply appreciated by the end customers. Obviously, it's a very, very large market, but the trick, as you and I both know, is always to pick the right path, the sequencing in which you build these products, the customers you go after, and so on. What drives that overall roadmap for you? Is it you just want to take a few customers, make them incredibly happy, whatever direction they pull you into? Or do you have, when you drive the team, do you have more of a set roadmap in mind? We'll build this kind of product and this kind of product and this kind of product. How do you make those decisions?
So, because we partner closely with our customers, our roadmap, believe it or not, changes every week. So, we have a roadmap, it's a potential roadmap. We iterate on it with our customers based on the projects they have. Sometimes you actually are not even sure what product you're going to build, but you have to do these three experiments to get data and then decide which product is the most viable one in that particular space. AI is far more complex than the classic cloud networking or data center networking. We have discrete networks for scale out, which are used for training to interconnect many, many clusters together or many, many GPUs together. Scale out networks used to be for, 10,000, 30,000 GPUs together. But now the AI jobs require up to 1 million GPUs interconnected together. That does not fit in a single building. So now you have to interconnect multiple data centers together, which is called scale across networking.
Mhm.
And that requires a completely different set of products, different cost, different power, deep buffers, long haul optics, security issues, and so on. But you're not done. Now you have inference, which requires scale up networking, which we are doing using Ethernet.
Mhm.
And as a result of that, you have these three breeds plus all the front end, which is classic cloud networking, to build for these hyperscalers. And that gives you about 20 to 25 products you need to build every year. The customers look at us and say, that's a lot, but we'll work with you, prioritize, and shorten it to here's the top 10 we should be doing right now.
Right. This is why this is $100 billion market going to 200 billion, because people think of it as, oh, it's networking, it's data center networking, but we're talking about scale up networks, scale out networks, scale across networks, front end networks, back end networks, management networks. And together, I mean, the diversity of products that you'll be building over the next few years, it's exciting to see. Now, the only way you can do that is if you have gas in the tank, which brings us to this capital raise. Look, with the size of the market you're going after, the credibility which you and your team have in the market, your ability to get this fundraise was never in contention. Putting myself now in your shoes, what were you looking for in addition to the capital? Because the capital was, you'd get the capital, but what additional things were you looking for that gave you the confidence that, hey, Lightspeed could be a good partner for this fundraise?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for supporting us both in Series A and Series B for being our lead investor. As you said, this is a lot of money. At the same time, in the grand scheme of things, cash is just cash. The value is one for one. But the relationship, the partnership, the support you need in this ecosystem goes way beyond just the capital you need. We need help with hiring. We need help with the ecosystem. We need help with customers. We need help not just with the first fundraise, but the second and the third and the fourth and so on. So, really, what we were looking for was someone I personally trust, someone who is going to stay with us in the long run, because not everything is going to be great forever. If you run into challenges, I need to be able to discuss openly here are the issues, what can you do better, and over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, build a great company. That's where I felt Lightspeed is truly the best partner. Of all the discussions I had, I think this is where trust and the relationship we've had in the past really goes beyond what others were able to offer.
I appreciate you saying that, Anshul. I mean, we built a firm over the last 26 years that deeply understands infrastructure, understands both the opportunity and gets excited by it, but also the challenges, so that we can build a platform that can serve you or your team as you hit those challenges, which you will, for sure. It's that kind of business. And so really, really appreciate the partnership. Much like you, I know this is your highest conviction journey. You invested a lot of your own personal savings into starting the company and getting it off the ground. In the same way for us, It's one of our highest conviction investments behind you and your team, first of all, behind this incredible market opportunity, second, and this opportunity for our investors, for our LPs, to be part of a journey of creating, a much needed, very innovative company in the networking market. I mean, if you look back at the market, at the networking space, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think I've seen much in the way of new in the last 20 years.
20 years, that's
yeah,
correct.
It's been 20 years in one of the largest markets in infrastructure. How can that be? So, that's what's exciting here. So really, really appreciate your partnership and your trust, and looking forward to building this with you.
Thank you so much, Guru.